Om Shanti. Welcome to this session of Interview with the Raj Yogi. And our topic is contentment and inner security. But first, we'll start with a reflection. For most of us, we've developed the deep habit of looking outside to fill up with whatever might be lacking inside. We even look outside for comfort, well-being, security. What we are seeking is a feeling, something invisible. And yet we continue to turn to what is visible, external. It is possible that what we seek, we actually need to go inwards to find. And how liberating that would be. No longer dependent on the outer world for peace of mind. But able to go inwards to provide peace to my own mind. This is the promise of a spiritual study. This capacity to care for and to comfort my own self from the inside out. Beginning to turn inwards rather than outwards to fill up. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Welcome to those who've joined for Interview with Raj Yogi. Again, our evening's topic is contentment and inner security. And this topic of contentment, I find very much enjoyable, just really reflecting within the last couple of years of just how the impact of having contentment. And I believe I remember you as sharing at one point in time, it wasn't in an interview, that it's perhaps one of the greatest capacities one could have. Can you share on that? Because I remember this a long time ago. This is before being in the study. But I remember this feeling like being content would be such a powerful thing to have. And someone had said to me, well, isn't that just settling? Mm-hmm. I found that quite an interesting comment.
Mm-hmm. So the idea of settling or getting by with whatever state or resigning oneself means that I'm getting comfortable with remaining empty. Whereas contentment means because I am no longer empty, I am comfortable. So there's a vast difference between the two. One is empty and the other is not. Contentment is very important for happiness. So through the spiritual study, we come to understand that happiness is a function of my quality of actions. So when I perform a certain quality of action, then the result is happiness. The quality of action I want to perform is actions where I am not taking. So I would have to be content or full in order to perform such actions where I don't take. And that will lead to happiness. So this is very different from settling, where I don't bother to fill up and I just try to get along with whatever I've got and act from that place. And so there won't be happiness.
Mhm. It's interesting you're mentioning about this aspect of taking. I'm not sure if many ever think about that they're taking at every moment. It sounds, I'm not sure how many want to feel that way or notice that within themselves.
Well, I suppose this has to do with the inner security bit, that we are very insecure. Rather than having inner security, we're insecure because we perform actions or move through the day with the hope, expectation that things will go a certain way and I'll feel okay if things go a certain way. So that's kind of creates a certain level of insecurity. My inner well-being is very dependent on things unfolding a certain way outside. Whereas if I'm content, then it's okay how things unfold. It does not in any way disturb that inner security. So there is a taking when there's not, in terms of wanting to take certain outcomes.
Do you feel that contentment is actually your natural nature?
I do. It's very interesting in general that we crave things that we have experience in. So otherwise we wouldn't be able to ask for it. So we are really craving things basically that we lost. We develop a longing for it. So we must have known this contented state, and it feels like that we are crying out for it. When we lose it, we cry out for it.
Mhm. I feel that when I asked that question, it reminded me very early on in the study, you had shared something that was in the YMCA Peace Medal Awards when you were giving a speech about peace is actually part of one's personality. And I remember at that time, I didn't really understand what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps we don't really think about contentment or peace as being a personality. We may not even think about it because I know you were trying to convey it's not a reaction. But even at that point, I didn't really understand what that meant either.
So we speak about, when we talk about our personality or someone's character, we say, well, they're a very angry person or a very bossy person or a very patient person. But in this case, we're saying they're a very peaceful person. It's really not unusual. We're just describing the personality or nature of that being. And when we say it's someone's nature or personality, it's independent of what's going on. Someone who is shy doesn't have to make effort to be shy in the situation. It's just how they operate.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're saying it's our nature, then it's not a reaction to things. It's just how we show up in various situations.
Now, because this is Interview with a Raj Yogi, this is about Raja Yoga, could you share how being aware on the soul actually affects really accepting, or actually the sense of that it makes sense that contentment is peace is my nature, versus if I'm just thinking of myself as a person, could you not be aware you're being a soul and just actually feel that contentment and peace is my nature?
I think what happens is that intellectually or in our head, we get it and know that's the way it should be, but to actually experience it, I would need to go into a sort of spiritual workshop, if you will, soul consciousness, to actually feel it, for it not just to remain an idea, a nice idea, an intellectual exercise that I know I should be content. This isn't an unusual idea as I move through the world. I have desires, but to actually feel that, it's very natural when I'm soul conscious, and it seems to elude us when I'm not. So to get the experience, to move from head to experience, requires that soul consciousness.
Because this word peace is actually, it is a common word out there. It is one of the most universal qualities that everyone is looking for, regardless of where you are and who you are. But even before being in the study, I certainly have learned so much being in the study, but you hear that word peace all the time. Peaceful beings, we're peaceful people. And what have you discovered for yourself being in the study that has really made that difference?
And I don't even know if this is related, but for some reason, this story someone shared recently just popped into my mind. They were sharing that their son, who's a hockey player, and his friend, who's also a hockey player, went to a studio, a local studio. It's a yoga studio. And in the name of the yoga studio, there is the Hindi term for contentment. So contented yogi, I guess. But in Hindi, this name. So we're not sure what happened, but when the two came into the class, and it was a very full class, so you put your mat very carefully on the floor, and if you're new, you just try and find a space. And so they did this, and they're very aware, and they're very serious hockey players, athletes. So they've taken yoga classes as part of their regime. So they're aware of it and everything. They're just taking the class. And at the end, the instructor came up and was very, very upset with them, and basically felt that they had disturbed the class, which of course, for these tools, they just went into class. They didn't do anything disturbing. So it was a very unusual, but how discontent the instructor was. Which was ironic, since the studio is about contentment. And so what was going on inside of the instructor, even if, and I know they did not, but even if they had done anything, was there from that place of deep peace? Because again, our peace, the idea that my peace is so dependent, those souls didn't even know what they had done wrong or what they were supposed to do. That was never shared. So the instructor has something in their head about what would keep them content, how the people were supposed to come in, put their mats, what they're supposed to, all of these boxes had to be checked for the instructor to feel content. So that's what a reaction looks like. Now, if the instructor was truly content, and let's say the souls, I don't think they did, but let's say they put their mats in the wrong direction, whatever. If we're in that peaceful or contented place internally, then we're able to respond to something that might be disruptive or whatever. But from such a powerful place, this peaceful, contented place, that it actually can support or benefit the situation. But so it's really this inside out, that I'm going into an experience that taps into or unlocks the resources of the soul, rather than being so dependent on the outer world operating the way I need it to. And it's not even based on any absolute, it's based on my own experiences, preferences, biases, very arbitrary things. So it creates an impossible, a very discontented world.
I feel you've made that connection quite clearly in terms of the relationship between contentment and inner security. when we realize that security is like, can I feel stable at any moment? Do I feel happy in a moment? We often think about security, let's say on a very physical level, in terms of if I had a house, I have some security, I've had investments in this place, I have security. Or when it comes to this word insecure, we often think about things like lacking confidence, but we never really think about this aspect of contentment or just not being disturbed.
Yes, I think a big part of experiencing myself genuinely, not thinking about it, but really going to the experience that I am an eternal being. I do not die. I am not physical. I am life itself. And I go deeply into that experience. Something called fearlessness is created. And to me, that's really where that security comes from. And also, the odd thing is, I'm able to let go of all the things I was trying to use to replace that very deep anxiety that comes with feeling I am mortal. And that includes not just the body, but also my value is very perishable. And so I let go of all the very limited ways I was trying to feel immortal, but also valuable. And oddly enough, that letting go is where contentment begins, filling up. I go into that state of being a soul. I let go of all the things that weren't really working. And that creates space to really fill up with what that true sense of self, that immortal sense of self, and that very valuable sense of self. Those two things make us very content and very secure.
I don't think many ever we think about physically speaking that that we're mortal. But in terms of value, that we are actually also struggling with our value feeling very temporary, in other words, mortal, that I feel that is very significant in terms of this aspect of security.
Yes, I think that's really what makes us insecure and want to control situations a lot. Sometimes I'll be in a meeting and you can sort of feel, if you're quiet, you can feel that everyone has a different comfort with speaking within the gathering, within the group. Now, in their mind, they have convinced themselves that they have nothing to share. But they actually walk away from the meeting a little discontented, a little frustrated, because they did have things to share, but they didn't feel secure enough to share them. And they'll usually blame the gathering, that the gathering did not make them feel safe. But actually, it's that really, again, that fearlessness, that really feeling comfortable within the self. So I can share and not be so concerned about how it will be received or whether it will reduce my value or increase my value by what I share, but just really to share from such an authentic place. So I don't walk away frustrated, but my sense of value remains intact regardless of how it's received. So I think it requires a little bit of honesty as well with the self, where that security is coming from. And yes, if my value is coming from also a really internal, imperishable place, or being so dependent, then I can act in a way that doesn't lead to frustration.
What is this relationship then between contentment and peace? Like, I remember you often sharing that when I can let go, I actually fill up.
Yeah, it is said that contentment isn't accumulating more stuff, it's being less needy, if you will, having less desires. And this idea of wanting or needing, etc., literally the mind is trying to hold more and more stuff in terms of thoughts. The thoughts are so much about, I need this to happen, I need that to happen. And so we want the day to go, so like our mind is constantly grasping all of these different desires that we would like to have fulfilled in order to feel okay or at peace. And so contentment, meanwhile, there is a genuine source of peace within the self that's completely neglected. Like this sort of very a cap on this inner reservoir. So the moment that the mind is not busy trying to hold all these different things and it frees up to connect with that, open the tap on that inner reservoir, that's the idea of, okay, I let go of the stuff the mind is usually busy with so that the mind is free to experience this inner reservoir of peace.
Letting go, I remember you'd shared, takes a lot of power to let go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating because of having quite a few conversations with souls who are just starting Raja Yoga, and that they're for them to actually, recognize, and even for me, it took quite some time to realize that that peace is a personality. And it's as if we become so desensitized that I know it's such a simple example, but we can't seem to cross that over to the relevance towards ourself, is that, a rose is always just emanating a certain kind of fragrance. It doesn't just do it at certain times of the day or for certain people when they walk by a rose. To think that our true nature is peace, sometimes it feels like it kind of falls flat in terms of the significance of what that really means.
I think, this is the reason why with the Raj Yoga course, we try to spend as much time as possible on this idea of being a soul and also a relationship to the Supreme Soul, who we call the ocean of peace. So this sort of true spiritual family I come from. But I am a soul, and I really want to spend time, and I know I'm starting to really understand that actually when I'm experiencing this unique form of living or inner peace, that's the sign that I'm really accessing soul consciousness. So we want to really know the difference between a peace that comes from reaction, from being in a beautiful place or nice music or all of these wonderful external environments or contexts we try to create to feel more peaceful, versus the peace that comes from shifting my awareness. These are two very different things. And that's what we want to discover so we can know the difference and also develop that trust, faith that, okay, I know now what this personality of peace is about.
Do you feel that bridges are important? That if a soul doesn't feel they can be there at that time, where they're at, that they may need to depend on music to get to that experience, or be in nature to try to transition? Is that at all valid?
I think that as long as we're very honest about what we're doing. So in fitness, we have something called progressions. If someone does not have the strength or capacity at that moment to do a particular exercise, then the instructor will create or figure out a progression, a variation on the exercise, which is less strenuous. And we're very clear that that's what we're doing. So until we're able to do this unsupported, we're going to use this support. Is that holding them back? No, because we're very aware of what we're doing, it's creating that power, knowing that the intention is eventually. So what I will often do is, instructors will say, okay, so let's do this with a shorter lever from the knees or whatever, but let's try a couple of counts of the more advanced progression as we begin to move. So we're always very honest about what we're doing. So I need to know need to stay very aware that's what I'm doing, because otherwise I'm still subtly in that trap of depending on the external to create the experience. I'm back to peace being a reaction. So it's okay if, even we do it all. We go into a quiet meditation room, or we might have certain images or music or lighting. And that's helping maybe to kickstart, but I need to stay aware that's what I'm doing. It's why we practice open-eyed meditation. The intention is always to be able to walk and move around, to not be dependent. But we're so rusty at it that initially we go into a bit of an artificial environment. And ideally, we're very aware that's what we're doing. We're constantly test driving if we've accumulated any power by trying to apply it as we walk and move around.
We've heard, of the original students that oftentimes they would go into nature. The first student, Brahma Baba, would take them into places where there is maybe by the ocean, right? Or that they were actually in this solitude of isolation for quite some time as well. Did you feel that, everyone, all these different students are there, but depending on just how accurate I am in terms of that quality of soul consciousness, that bridge becomes a bridge, but to the point where one doesn't need that bridge anymore then?
I think they were always very clear, and they were having also to develop tremendous power. So they were really taking full advantage, if you will, of that environment. But I think they were always very aware that they were eventually going to integrate, that this was going to go outside of that isolation. It's very interesting because that's a very common concept of spirituality, that contentment. I feel very content when I'm in lovely environments. We go off into the jungle or a cave and experience lots of peace and fulfillment. But the question always is, that's wonderful, and I get to, in that silence, I get to perhaps really easily connect to, and this is the key thing, is to connect to that inner peace. So I have to be honest and check, am I feeling peaceful? Because in this peaceful setting, I've been able to more easily access that inner peace, or am I feeling peaceful because of the environment? And the only way we can really start to check that is to see if it holds up once I go into other environments.
So that can even be, I know you were talking about we were talking about the original students, but it feels like that can still happen now. I need certain music to be a certain way. I need the lighting to be a certain way. And hopefully it gives me an opportunity to see that, am I really actually able to discern the difference?
That's really about it, is being very honest. And what is my objective? With Raj Yoga, the objective is to be peace in action, not peace in a meditation room. So I'm doing some exercises or practices in the meditation room, but I'm very clear what I'm doing with the intention that this will integrate into peace in action. So there's nothing wrong with seated meditation. And this is why, again, I think open-eyed meditation is really a fascinating thing to experiment with, because that's going to really create a good bridge to integration.
Do you recall your experience when you first came to Raj Yoga and you were invited to keep your eyes open?
I remember when I came, and I don't even know if there was instruction on so-called meditation. What was shared was spiritual knowledge, and I so enjoyed what I was hearing in terms of spiritual knowledge that I was really happy to think about it. And it's not till later that I understood that was the so-called meditation, was simply to reflect on eternal truths. So I think part of it is, which I could do with my eyes open and while I'm grocery shopping and all sorts of things. So I think part of it is to make sure I understand what meditation is when we say open-eyed meditation. there's a strong tradition or sort of impression that meditation is kind of checking out or drifting off. And yes, probably want to close your eyes for that. But if it's okay, I'm going to reflect on these ideas about what is eternal. I can do that anywhere, anytime. And then I want to go into very deeply feeling it or experiencing it. And so that's why sometimes we want to be seated so that we can have full concentration.
You partly answered my question or addressed it in terms of where is that transition and from reflecting on it to actually experiencing it, because we can try to even think our way into a feeling, but it's not necessarily a realization of oneself and discovery of oneself.
So yes, in the course, we talk about the difference between the mind and intellect. And everyone's will probably admit their mind is super overactive. So it can do all sorts of interesting things and create feelings from what it thinks about. That's not quite where we're trying to go, though. We need the mind. We need it to think about these things, but the intellect is really what's of interest in the course, and that's the thing we want to realize these ideas to, as we say, experience or accept. And the intellect got very rusty and compromised by chewing on wrong ideas, temporary ideas, limited ideas. So part of the reason the knowledge is so powerful is because it's actually strengthening or sculpting the intellect so that I am more and more likely to be able to experience what I'm thinking about.
So the reason why I'm asking these questions is regarding this aspect of security, because we can become quite, I suppose, comfortable in certain situations. But if we don't have those situations, we feel quite insecure to be able to access that sense of self.
Yes, and I think these are wonderful things to just gauge and assess in the self, so then I know what I need to focus on.
Well, thank you for those who joined. And we're always keeping an eye on the chat box, audio specifically for Instagram, but questions, comments that you may have, topics you would like to explore. So feel free to always let us know on Instagram or YouTube. And let's have a little reflection right now.
We live in a world where we try to acquire more and more stuff. But when I sit quietly and honestly ask the self, what do I need? What do I need to feel that well-being, that security, that comfort? What do I need? And there's probably very little, and it's probably not physical. To be able to trust the self, to be able to value the self, to be able to guide the self, to experience the dignity of the self. Very little that I need that will fill me up. And all of it is invisible. So I'd like to come into my inner meditation room, the one that goes with me wherever I am. And if I start to feel a little anxious, a little insecure, a little uncertain, I can go into that space inside and remember I am an eternal being with these beautiful, eternal qualities. It takes just a second to experience, and in that second, I feel more full, more calm, more content, and it's easier to let go. There's very little the soul needs, but it goes deeply into the heart, creates that deep sense, all is well. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. So just a warm reminder that our next Raja Yoga Foundations course in English is in July. And those are the the Wednesdays of July. And I believe it's 6:30 to 8 o'clock in the evening. So you're welcome to visit the center's website to register. That is both online as well as on site at the Northeast Center. But we're always encouraging souls to come to the online. We also have drop-in sessions for experiencing being a soul, because that is really where we really have a chance to practice what we are reflecting on or we're discussing. So you can visit the center's website for those timings, but they are on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays, 6:30 to 7:30 Calgary time, and on site at the Northeast Center, 6:30 to 7:30. Thank you again for joining. Shanti.